Many of the best Pokemon are the best in large part because of their typing, which does a lot of work for them. Like yeah, of course Ferrothorn switched in easily when it resists basically everything, but what's especially impressive is when a great Pokemon is great despite not having such obviously great typing. In fact, it'll be incredibly flawed, yet what makes it so unique and interesting is that this flawed typing, which might not work for others, is exactly what this specific Pokemon needs to succeed. They make their usually bad typing work for them. So let's begin and jump right into the holiday spirit with our first Pokemon, Iron Bundle. We kept our eyes wide shut to Delibird too long, and it eventually returned to unleash the spirit of Christmas with a vengeance. The Ice type is famous for its dreadful defensive deficiencies, drastically dragging down the distinguished dependability of the Water type, which must say goodbye to its resist to fire and steel, and gain weaknesses to fighting and rock in exchange for nearly nothing. The quadruple Ice weakness it gains is nice, yet minimally useful relative to the drawbacks it brings. Ice isn't exactly known for bringing out the best of Water's offensive prowess either. It would seem that providing one of the best offensive stabs in the game would be especially useful, seeing as Waters already love using Ice Beam, but the fact is that Ice does nothing to help Water get past opposing Waters, thus limiting its use as a secondary stab. The fact that most Water and Ice types tend to be slower Pokemon more geared towards hit taking, like Lapras, Dugong, and Walrein, also meant that this talent was largely wasted. On the offensive side, you had Arctovish, which you'd think would succeed considering it had the monstrously powerful Vicious Wren that sent Dracovish to Ubers, but being Water Ice and having base 55 speed meant that even if Arctovish also had Dracovish's strong jaw, it would have remained dunked on by just about everything. The only Water Ice type that really succeeded was Cloyster, and it still wasn't succeeding because of being Water Ice. In fact, the half Ice typing only held it back as a Spiker in Gens 2 and 3, while as a Shell Smasher in Gens 5 and on, its Water typing only ever came into the equation rarely, and bizarrely enough, as a surprise, a lure more than anything else. Iron Bundle inherits this lowly legacy, which makes it all the more shocking that it wound up being as astonishingly broken as it is, especially since the special attack its success largely hinges on isn't as extremely over the top as you'd expect it would require to overcome its innate flaws. It certainly wasn't going to be making its mark with hit taking though. Surprisingly, it actually has a seriously impressive base 114 defense stat, but with a measly 56 base HP and its famously flawed typing. After all, Cloyster hardly made it work with 180 base defense, and Bundle wasn't exactly offering utility on par with Spikes. This defense stats thus wasn't getting it much further than being able to take a priority move, which was admittedly useful. Bundle instead leans fully into Water Ice as offense, which is what it should be, but you really have to crank those stats up for it to work. That aforementioned 124 special attack might seem underwhelming. It's of course an excellent stat in of itself, but might feel a tad low for a Paradox Pokemon, and even clocks in at 1 point lower than the non-Paradox Hydreigon. However, this is more than compensated for by its absolutely perfect speed stat of base 136. This is extraordinarily fast in its own right, but it's actually even better than that, because it gets to jump on by 1 point on the small yet top-tier elite cadre of monstrously strong base 135s, Fluttermane, Chien-Pao, Koraidon, and Miraidon, meaning that even after its swift ban from OU for going Terminator mode, it had a strong niche for some time even in Ubers. It was eventually displaced from viability in the tier by DLC power creep, but it wouldn't be going anywhere near OU again. The speed was what was really so killer about it, as being able to get the jump on and destroy such notorious speedsters allowed it to unleash the full extent of its special attack. Its speed was actually so key, it was in effect a power boost of sorts, an especially valuable one when so much of the game was unable to withstand such huge hits, and thus adopted a strategy of constantly escalating speed. Bundle's status as a Paradox Pokemon was especially key here, since it was able to play the booster energy Quark Drive game just fine. But wait, what of that whole walled by Waters thing? That offensive prowess doesn't mean much if you're going to be so easily stuffed by such a commonplace response. Again, its special attack is great, but it's hardly effortlessly mowing through resist. However, Iron Bundle didn't have to worry about Waters walling it at all. In fact, Waters were merely another of the many targets it threatened to effortlessly destroy. As if Ice wasn't already an elite stab, it also had Freeze Dry at its disposal, which was a special attacking ice move that hit Water super effectively. Water and Ice is an incredible combination against pretty much everything that isn't water, so you had Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, and Freeze Dry for opposing Waters. Finally, the stats required to make this offensive Water Ice concept work, and you even had a fourth move slot still available as well, allowing it to further mess with opponents. You could use Taunt, Encore, Flip Turn, though Iron Bundle was such a terror that it could just run its 3 stab moves and be just as menacing for it. Talk about making your typing work for you. Now that brings us to our next Pokemon, menacingly flying through the air with Shaymin Sky, the form change that took Shaymin from Pokemon's adorable Sonic equivalent to a blood boiler on par with, if not exceeding, Rush Hour Road Rage. Grass flying seems like it has its good points on paper, but but a lot has to come together to overcome the bad. The Stealth Rock weakness is first and foremost hanging over everything, but right alongside it is the quadruple ice weakness, which is really bad for a grass type, considering most grasses, like landform Shaymin, as a prime example, are meant to take on waters, electrics, and grounds. Many of the best Pokemon in the game, putting aside how grass flying no longer resists electric, since you can take it as an electric neutral flying type, the larger issue is that seeing as many such Pokemon often carry some form of ice coverage, grasses generally need to be capable or somewhat capable of taking ice moves. Even Breloom, hardly a paragon of special bulk, can withstand most hidden power ices, and depending on the set, even many ice beams. However, grass flying is especially vulnerable in this regard because even if the Pokemon in question is bulky enough to withstand such a move, it's going to be from very high health, and Stealth Rock will knock it down too far. Especially defensive Torterra may also be quad ice weak, but its Stealth Rock resist means it can still withstand certain such moves in a pinch. The Stealth Rock weakness also tends to undercut the greatest appeal of grass flying, which is that the defensively robust grass gains a valuable resist to fighting, one of the best offensive types in the game. But as if Stealth Rock wasn't enough in this regard, that half-flying type means the fighter is just as capable of obliterating you with Ice Punch's coverage, or if not Ice Punch, at least Stone Edge. Really, the Stealth Rock weakness undoes pretty much all of the good. Yeah, you're now bug neutral and don't need a fear U-turn, and you're immune to spikes, but is it worth it? Just as the immunity to Earthquake is largely redundant, given grass's already existing resistance, the answer is mostly not, because grass flying isn't exactly threatening to rock the house down offensively either. Oh sure, they have some nicely complementary synergy. Opposing grasses can't resist your grass stab when you're also threatening super effectively flying stab, while opposing rocks can't resist your flying stab for fear of the grass backing it up. This is solid, as is flying hitting grass resistant fires and dragons neutrally, and grass hitting flying resistant electrics neutrally as well. But more crucially, both your stabs are being resisted by steel. This doesn't have to be a deal breaker, the same could be said for Kartana for instance, but the issue becomes significantly more pronounced on account of the Stealth Rock weakness of it all, as well as the fact that most grasses aren't exactly overflowing with the power and or coverage to overwhelm such a prominent sturdy resist. To both ends, Kartana is Stealth Rock resistant for ease switching in and has insane power creep as well as coverage to threaten steals. Grass flying needs its other traits imbued with some serious heft because the typing just isn't going to cut it on its own. It doesn't help that examples of grass flying are so lowly, see Tropius and Jumpluff, the former unable to deal any sort of damage even despite having Dragon Dance since Gen 4 and gaining Hurricane in Gen 9, but it's a pair of good types that don't tend to especially work so well together. But Shaymin Sky, or Skymin, defies this and does so spectacularly. Its Serene Grace ability would be a danger sign no matter what Pokemon it's on. Dunsparce has been witnessed giving OU standards some grief with para-flinch antics, even when the flinch part is coming from Headbutt. But Skymin is perfectly designed to fully weaponize its typing in tandem with its ability to deliver the fullest possible extent of its excruciating power. Its Seed Flare was already a hard hitter, 120 base special attack with 120 base power, and it was easy to fire off considering Skymin's incredible base 127 speed, getting the jump on even Darkrai, which was already considered incredibly fast. However, Skymin's Seed Flare really went from strong to outrageous, with Serene Grace doubling its already high 40% chance to drop the opponent's special defense rate by not one but two stages. An 80% chance to so severely slash the opponent's special defense with your most powerful stab is already terrifying, but of course the real terror comes from its flying stab, where Air Slash's lower power is compensated by its stunning 60% flinch rate, and of course the fact that it doesn't need to flinch you too many times when it's harshly dropping your special defense. These two moves alone muscled through pretty much everything, so Skymin had plenty of freedom to experiment with other moves, and it did have the coverage to make quick work of many steals. Beyond hidden power, it also packed the much stronger Earth power, both which made quick work of steals with Seed Flare's staggering special defense drop, especially since Air Slash could always flinch a target into KO range if need be. However, Skymin didn't even necessarily need coverage, often adopting the most nightmarish substitute Leech Seed set ever. And here's where that typing really worked for it, because the grass is immune to its Leech Seed really didn't want to take its Air Slash. Even the flying neutral Ferrothorn fared especially well. Skymin was one of the most hated Pokemon in history, making Jirachi's famed Iron Head flinches look tame. Skymin became especially notorious for the distinction of gaining an astonishing 100% ban rate from early Gen 5 OU, and bear in mind, this was a period in the metagame where Deoxys Attack and Darkrai were still around, neither of which were unanimously voted out. To do so by making perfect use of such flawed typing is just extraordinary. Now we move on to the next Pokemon, not as normal as it may seem, with Mega Lopunny, the Mega that was single-handedly responsible for the return of normal type offense in the initial age of the Fairy type. With its widespread resistance, lack of super effective hits, and power that wasn't especially notable relative to its competition, normal type offense was already old hat by Gen 4. It does go pretty well with fighting, as it hits most of fighting's resist neutrally, while fighting blasts the steel and rock that would resist normal. But unless there's something really notable about the normal aspect of it, you'd probably be better off just using another fighter. The main appeal of being a normal fighting type is the fighting part after all, as that does actually have the super effective hits, but why not use a fighter whose complementary second stab can also threaten super effective damage as well? The wider the reach, the better. The secondary type will probably be more useful defensively as well. Normal's ghost immunity is excellent, but resisting nothing else is not. Plus, on that note, you know what normal and fighting don't help each other with at all? Ghost. Both of them are completely and utterly blanked by it. Yes, there's still a lot to like. See Beware, whose whopping power alongside Swords Dance and fluffy fueled physical bulk makes for a thoroughly unique niche, but having to rely on Shadow Claw to hit ghosts isn't great, nor is the paltry speed. Pirouette Meloetta is tremendously fast and strong, but the utter blandness of the normal fighting combo holds it back, to say nothing of the convoluted fiasco that is successfully transforming into its pirouette form to begin with. Now, Mega Lopunny is a Mega, so it should be better off, and it is. It actually has the stats needed to deliver on the promise of the normal fighting combo. Its speed is incredible, outrunning even speedsters like Ash Greninja and Tapu Koko, and its base 136 attack really brings the pain, especially since its fighting stab is High Jump Kick, even more powerful than close combat. As a bonus, its dual stabs of High Jump Kick and Return are bolstered further by the free damage of Fake Out, which is also a superb revenge killing tool. In fact, it's so good with just these 3 moves, it's free to toy with many others in the last slot, each with major, potentially game-breaking advantages. It's got the Garchomp Gliscor and Landorus Therian Shattering Ice Punch. It's got the secondary stab priority and quick attack to make it an even better revenge killer. It's got the attack boosting stab of Power Up Punch for late game cleaning. It's got Encore to lock an opponent into all manner of exploitable moves. It's even got Heal Bell to shrug off debilitating burns or paralysis, or even support similarly affected teammates. It is an absolutely incredible offensive Pokemon, specializing in destroying other offensive teams, which it outspeeds and decks with ease, and it could potentially pose quite a threat to bulkier squads as well. However, this wouldn't be worth nearly as much without Mega Lopunny's ability, which is what really lets it deliver the full extent of its normal fighting onslaught. Fake Out, Return, High Jump Kick, are these not completely and utterly blanked by ghosts? Actually worse, if you High Jump Kick into a ghost type, it's like you missed or hit into a Protect, and thus take stunningly high 50% recoil damage. Those covers moves don't tend to do anything about this either, as the best of them to address the issue is Ice Punch, which is 75 base power and non-stab. That's the thing though, Mega Lopunny is freely able to unleash its normal fighting power without the drawbacks of their shared immunity, as its scrappy ability allows normal and fighting moves to hit ghosts neutrally, just as if they were any other Pokemon, rather than be awkwardly forced into trying to make some coverage work for it in this regard, or have it be over-reliant on team support like Allure or Pursuit. Mega Lopunny was a perfectly designed storm to take such typing that seems innately relegated to lower tiers and instead allow it to dominate and define OU instead. Now, on the subject of dominating OU, perhaps a bit too much, we move on to Volcarona, the dancing moth that scene calls for its ban since it was originally revealed to the world under its Japanese name, Orugamosu. If you were designing a Pokemon for maximum brokenness, you wouldn't give it a quadruple Stealth Rock weakness, and even if you were trying to design some sort of optimally broken quad Stealth Rock weak, you still wouldn't land on Fire Bug. And indeed, when you look at Centiskorch, as much as it has several fine qualities, it is also severely flawed in ways that largely led back to its typing. Yet Volcarona is one of the most overwhelming, at least borderline broken Pokemon to ever receive consistent controversy over its repeatedly game-breaking, potentially unhealthy metagame impact. There are other similar successful, line-straddling quad Stealth Rock weeks where this is true. See Ho-Oh, which used to be a topic for a potential OU test for this reason, as well as the monstrous Mega Charizard Y. However, Fire Flying is pretty universally going to be a much better cost of doing such business. If you're going to pay such a price, you may as well reap the benefits. Being half flying gives a fire type similar benefits to that of Bug, i.e. a useful fighting resist and a largely redundant quad grass resist, but the flying type is also immune to spikes, toxic spikes, and earthquake, which is incredibly important. The half Bug Volcarona isn't so lucky. On the bright side, it does love that Bug makes it ground neutral at the very least. Then again, it also makes it weak to flying and neutral to opposing fire. The former is one thing, but the latter means it can especially struggle in dealing with opposing fire that resists not one but both of its stabs. So Bug isn't exactly the most complementary type. It's not perfect, but Volcarona does make the upside of Stab Bug Buzz work for it. Having a secondary stab that hits water neutrally is highly appreciated for fire types, and for it to be able to cleave through popular fire resist in Tyranitar and the Latian Slow Twins the way it does is amazing. That said, it's hardly an essential can't live without it part of Volcarona's game. game. It's got so much coverage begging to be crammed in. Giga Drain, Hidden Power, sometimes even Psychic, that it will drop Bug Buzz on many sets. Whereas Volcarona will never go without its Fire Stab, even in the one hyper-specific scenario when it might, when used on rain teams in Gen 5, which yes, it can be because it's just that good. It still usually runs Fire Stab. However, Volcarona is such a menace off the innate strength of Quiver Dance, with monstrous special attack, the gold standard of base 100 speed, and for good measure, even strong special defense for further helping boosting. It could do almost anything and threaten to sweep healthy, solid teams after a single turn. Yes, you have to inordinately go out of your way to support it with anti-stealth rock strategies, one of the most arduous tasks in singles, and one that's even more crucial than when you're doing it for something like Dragonite because of how much higher the stakes are. You don't look too kindly at the half bug typing in that situation. However, in spite of this, the fact that Bug Buzz isn't as essential to Volcarona as Quiver Dance or Fire Stab doesn't mean that Volcarona doesn't owe a great deal to its consistently skyscraping success to it. So effortlessly smashing its way through so many of the game's most crucial fire resists is indeed tremendous. Some sets value Bug Buzz so much, they pair Quiver Dance and the 2 stabs with Substitute and the Swarm ability over the usual Flame Body, for Bug Buzz to be the move that overwhelms whatever it's facing through sheer power alone. Plus, defensively, the fact that Volcarona can find setup opportunity against choice lock stab fighting moves is tremendous, as it punishes one of the most powerful offensive options the opponent's going to have. It'd be one thing to have a Quiver Dancer with typing like Steel Fairy, like yeah, shocker, that's gonna be good, but with Volcarona, it has exploitable typing that it actually makes work for it to peerless extent. Now we'll finish things with one of the Pokemon that Volcarona most commonly faced against, with Tyranitar. Pokemon's Godzilla, the one and only bedrock of the competitive scene for so many generations before its tragic eventual fall. Though at the time of this video, it's actually been making a return in viability in Gen 9. Its falloff was rightly attributed to its bad typing. In fact, as the generations went on, Tyranitar increasingly stood out for how much more exploitable its typing was relative to the robust combinations brandished by the Pokemon it was so commonly paired with. But that very typing that left Tyranitar so loaded with weaknesses, a problem exacerbated by its low speed, was the same typing that had allowed it to reign over the game for so long. You couldn't imagine a more optimal typing for Tyranitar, at least in its prime. The weaknesses were always there, even in its prime, but they were what it needed to pull off its peerless blend of utility. The crux of Tyranitar's excellence is that ever since Gen 4, it's packed the amazing combination of rock special defense boost under the sand that it summons, which is also meta-defining for the damage it rubs into so much of the game, affecting item choice, damage thresholds, and basically everything, alongside the strongest stat pursuit in the game, which is extraordinary utility and how it keeps in check several of the most important Pokemon around. T-Tar doesn't need to pursue it, of course. In Gen 4, it's an especially fearsome Dragon Dancer, and was great in Gens 2 and 3, with the former having no abilities and no perma-sand, while the latter had Sandstream, but no rock-type special defense boost, and both Gens' pursuit was special, and thus far from the only use Tyranitar had. But at its core, what kept Tyranitar going as such an essential Pokemon from these early gens until the newest ones was the unique, immediate, high-impact utility of its thoroughly specific typing that would otherwise be a detriment. Even at its best, it can sometimes feel like a drag to have Tyranitar being so slow, stacking on big weaknesses like fighting and water, but then you realize how irreplaceable its utility is. Other pursuiters like Weavile or Scizor, no matter how good they are, just aren't the same in terms of switching ability. Tyranitar comes in against everything from Latios to Heatran to, in many instances, even water types, especially with a Pastral Berry attached. And this is in part precisely because of that rock-type sand special defense boost. But only in part. It'd merely be a good wall if not for how it forced the issue with stat pursuit, which is so strong it even tends to pulverize many a neutral target, and not frail ones either. In Gen 6, Choice Band T-Tar could potentially pursuit trap a fleeing Heatran for the benefit of teammates like Talonflame, Superior, and Mega Scizor. The fact that in spite of leaving it so seemingly easy to beat up on T-Tar itself, the typing was exactly what allowed its impact to go beyond just T-Tar. Is its typing bad? Yes. A Pokemon with such a typing wouldn't be able to succeed just off of that typing alone the way a ground flying might. Rock in general doesn't tend to pair with other types too well. Mono Rock isn't bad, but there's a reason Gigalith didn't eclipse T-Tar once it also got Sandstream, and didn't have the immense value of Stab Pursuit. And even when Pursuit was removed from the game in Gen 8, Stab Crunch was so menacing to defensive staples like Galarian Slowking that it made Choice Band T-Tar a legitimate OU tier threat as well. That and the fact that it resisted Ghost and was immune to Psychic, which had become more important than ever in a pursuitless world. Helping against Dragapult and Tapu Lele in this instance was almost besides the point, though overall, T-Tar was the ultimate example of a godlike Pokemon with terrible typing, because that typing was exactly what it needed. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Daniel Isbeast, Corman, Eric Dissing, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megaman VGC, Mojo Gameslayer, Nurse Jake, One Penguin to Rule, Pretzel SP, Seagulls Incorporated, Sojiro Sakura, Spavoon, Gylaria, Soros and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Kiboflu, Wardine, Zathor for their major support of our videos.